Have you found that if you rely too much on journaling what's happening, you don't archive the memory in your mind? I ask that because I've found that with myself. I don't know if you have that or not.
Well, I'm old enough now where I don't trust my ability to archive anything. but I don't have any problem with that. I have experienced false memories. A lot of times when I'm trying to recall something, and then I go back and I read my journals about it, I'm kind of surprised that they don't completely sync.
Really?
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really like about the journaling, is it keeps me honest.
Do you think maybe like you're archiving the memory of a memory, like you're archiving the last time you remembered the memory, and that's why it's like a little skewed from the actual true memory which is left in your journal?
Well, I think what happens is time just kind of wears down your memories. Mm-hmm. and your memories are selective, so it's hard to say what exactly happened versus what you remember happening. Mm-hmm. For example, when I went into the Groton forest, one of the things that I distinctly remember is these two woodpeckers mating. It was in early spring, mm-hmm. and I can recall that memory any day of the week, 20, 30 years later. But what the trail was like that I made from there over to Wilderness Pond, that's different. That's kind of sketchy, and the mind has a tendency to kind of fill in the gaps. And so that's when I reference my journals.
Yeah, because how many trails would your mind have to remember, and how many similarities are there within those trails versus, if you've seen the mating ritual of those birds once in your life, it's like that doesn't have to compete with any other memory.
That's true. That was pretty unique.
Like a week or two ago, I was hiking up in the town forest, and I was waiting for a spot that felt like it was calling to me, right? I hiked further than, on a different trail further than I ever have. And I was like, when the spot is right for me to, quote unquote, set up camp, then I'll know it. And I can remember everything about that spot because that was the right spot. But this was a new trail. I don't remember the curves of the trail. I don't remember anything I saw, because how many new trails are there? Hundreds, thousands.
Yeah.
But how many spots are the spot? One at a time.
Yeah, there are certain memories that are more powerful than others, and those you keep in your mind regardless. But every time I go back and look at my journals, whether they're my personal journal, my daily journal, my philosophical journal, or my field journal, I'm always a little bit surprised at what I find in them.
You keep a different journal for each of those?
Oh yeah, I got a whole bunch of journals. Yeah, I journal everything. It's like, it's almost a compulsion.
Yeah.
I started out journaling to work out emotional issues when I was a teenager. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of blossomed in all directions from there. So I was developing a lot of my more philosophical concepts in college and whatnot. I kept a specific journal just for that.
Do you ever find that writing it out will lead you to a direction, or maybe not a solution, but something that leads to a solution more than just thinking it would, because you can see and anticipate the path that just that line of writing would go to because of how much you've written?
Yeah. Even this morning when I was writing, I'm developing some pretty difficult concepts having to do with evolutionary biology, and then every once in a while I'll write a phrase and I'll go yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
It's like that guy's
really bright.
that's what I'm trying to say, and I'll get myself for trying to say it before I even realize that's what I was trying to say. Mm-hmm. It just kind of comes out, and that's why a lot of times I think writers will say, well, it kind of wrote itself.
Yeah.
You know, it's like you just become a kind of a vehicle for it. And in my best writing moments, that's definitely how it feels. It feels like I'm only a messenger.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Let me run this by you because I was thinking about this the other day. So I can be working on something, and I can be working on it hard for like days or weeks and have nothing. And then the muse clicks. I'm the vessel. It comes out in an hour. What took me weeks before with no progress, it comes out in an hour. And I'm inclined to think, wow, that only took me an hour to do.
No, it didn't.
It took weeks.
It took weeks. Yeah, but the muse, you know, the muse spoke.
It's so interesting. I'm glad that you have a relationship with that too, because it's like trying to articulate that to someone that doesn't. Sounds like crazy people.
I'm a morning person, so a lot of times the muse wakes me up.
Yeah.
And I'm writing in my head before I even get out of bed. And it's almost a problem because I'm getting up earlier and earlier. These days I'm getting up, I try to wait until 5 o'clock, but I'm getting up at 4:30 more often than not. So that's a little crazy.
Yeah. Do you ever have, like, you push it off, you're like, I'm gonna remember this, I'll write it in my head, and then you don't? That is the most frustrating thing that, like, to me, I'll have a concept or something, maybe a turn of phrase that I'm like, oh, this is really good.
That's why I always keep a piece of paper and I keep a card here, and a pen just in case.
Nice, that's
something
good
might
thinking.
happen on the way home. You never know.
Yeah, I ought to start picking that up.
Yeah, I always carry some kind of index card or a piece of paper or something and my pen just in case. And I have them next to my bed too, just in case. Although by the time I get out of bed, you know, not to disturb my wife, I'm going to go in the other room anyway, so that's rather moot. But yeah, my best ideas come to me when I least expect them. And in fact, I'd probably say that I probably developed more really good ideas in the shower than I have anywhere else.
Yeah. It's like a vacuum, right? It kind of forces that flow state, specifically the shower. Because I don't know about you, this place that we're walking right here, this is a vacuum to me. If I ever need to think, I walk here because obviously there's everything around us. But for all intents and purposes, relative to day-to-day life and shy of being in the woods, there's nothing around us. This is a weird little purgatory where the walk is exactly the same all the way. And I can just be in my thoughts. And the shower is like that. It's like you are closed off on all sides. And there's no stimuli to block the flow of ideas.
And that's true in the shower. Right here, I don't think that's necessarily true because to me, there's all kind of subtle signals that I'm getting from wild nature right now.
Like what? Hit me with some.
Flowers. Right now, there's no flowers, but the wind, the sunlight, the movement of the clouds, the slight reverberation of the branches in the trees. All these things tell me something. And I don't always know what it is that they're trying to tell me, but more often than not, even a simple walk down a straightforward path like this can inspire me.
Yeah.
And
well, I guess all the stimuli that is here that I'm zoning out is exactly the stimuli that sparks your particular interests, right?
Yeah, I find I studied philosophy formally back in college. Oh, was that been 40 years ago? And I read a lot. Mm-hmm. But what really inspires me is wild nature. I find things here, in even the most commonplace things, like this right here, for example. See, there's just a little bit of water here. You know, this little flowing little brooklet. Mm-hmm. I've sat down in there and just kind of meditated on it.
Yeah, me as well.
Yeah, have you?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good place to meditate, right down in there, yeah. And just, you know, letting the stream do the talking, as it were.
Yeah.
And sometimes I can make sense of it. And sometimes I'm just sitting next to a stream for a while.
And either way, that's a win, though.
It's a win. It's a win either way. Yeah, anytime I'm out in the wild, it's a win. And I've had moments, you know, where it's been hairy, you know, when I've been out in the wild and it's been hairy.
Yeah, some of your time in Alaska seems to have been particularly wild.
Yeah, that was, I wanted to see what real bona fide wilderness was like. And because I had immersed myself in different wilderness areas out in the Pacific Northwest and in the Rockies and of course here in the Northeast. But yeah, I wanted to see what it was like to be out into the wilderness instead of into a wilderness area.
Yeah.
And so I had that bush pilot fly me into that airstrip and drop me off. That 300-yard gravel airstrip out in the middle of nowhere. And I spent 2.5 weeks there. Having a real bona fide wilderness experience, and there were moments when it was terrifying.
Yeah.
I would say more than terrifying was disorienting.
Interesting. What do you mean by that?
It's one thing to go into a wilderness area for a couple of days and then come out, and it's another to go out into the wild and to know that you can't just leave.
Yeah.
I had to wait a couple of weeks for that bush pilot to come back.
Yeah, you can't just find north and walk.
Well, I could, but in the amount of time it would have taken me to get out of there, heading on a lost azimuth, the plane would have been back.
Yeah.
It would have taken a while. And so in that particular situation, I felt like I had to be really careful.
Yeah.
Like,
you're not at the top of the food chain there. If I remember right, there was a passage where you had a grizzly and cubs go by, right?
Oh yeah. I had bears in my camp. Yep. Yeah, and it wasn't a grizzly. It was. I was on the Alaskan coast, and so therefore they were Alaskan brown bears.
Okay.
So they were referred to sometimes as Kodiak bears. They're huge, and the full-grown male Kodiak that I encountered on my 4th day in the bush was, I estimate, someplace around 1,000 pounds.
Holy.
And I stepped into his rear boot print and stepped back out and then looked at it. And that's when I first realized what I was up against.
Yeah.
And I was carrying a .44 Magnum for protection, but I mean, that would have been a last-ditch effort.
Yeah, I mean,
the truth of the matter is, one swipe of his paw across my chest and I would have been a goner.
Yeah.
Even if he was just, annoyed with me and just trying to get me out of his face.
Yeah, you're a bug.
I was just, I didn't want to be in the way.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't so much that I felt like he was going to try to hunt me down and eat me. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to annoy him.
Yeah.
So when I went through the bush, I made a lot of noise.
So no surprise.
Yeah,
this guy's
coming through.
Yeah.
Here's Walt, I'm coming. If you're out there, wake up, Mr. Bear. Move away. No offense. No, it was, but more dangerous than that was my own hubris. I tried to cross the stream and the river, and it was snowmelt in July.
Oh golly.
So it was ice cold.
Yeah, and you probably didn't realize that.
I got halfway across it. I was using a stick, and I got basically up to mid-thigh and halfway across the river before I realized that I could no longer feel my feet.
Oh man.
And that was a stupid move. And then I was trying to go up along the side of the river, go deeper into the wild, and I was following a moose trail that got into some devil's club, which is a real thorny bush that's about 5-6 feet high. And I started chopping a path after a while. I said, well, I'm gonna get through here, by golly. And I started chopping a path with my little hatchet. and the devil's club flew back in my face.
Oh no.
And it was like, I was lucky I didn't hurt myself doing that, and so on and so forth. And after a while of being in the bush, I realized that my own worst enemy was me.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned hubris, because it short sells the nuance of all the rest, but for me, that has always been my greatest takeaway, is like scale and how foolish it is to position myself as a person, humans collectively as a species, position us where we do in our minds, not just along the food chain, but like the whole universal scale. And like going out into a situation like that, I would imagine, I've never done it, but the smaller scale situations that I've put myself in that are comparable, it's like that's the biggest takeaway time after time, is makes me almost feel a bit like a fool in a humbling way, not in a painful way.
I actually published an essay or a short narrative in a friend's online publication, and I was talking about my initial experience when I landed in the bush.
Yeah.
And the piece was called God's Fool.
Yeah.
Because I went into the bush to confront my maker or die trying. It was a spiritual journey, and I was determined I was going to make this happen. You know, I was going to encounter God face to face in the wild, if anywhere, right?
Yeah.
And
it's not going to be at Subway.
no, that's what I thought. And yeah, I was going to go into the bush and confront my maker or die trying. And then after a few days, I realized I was just going to die trying. I was going to pull all these stupid tricks, and I was going to put myself in a situation that I couldn't get out of. And I was by myself, and so if I couldn't get out of it, there was nobody to rescue me. I didn't have a radio. You know, there was no GPS. You know, I was on my own, and if I wasn't smart, I was going to die in the bush. And they have a saying for that up in Alaska, for example. You know, because a lot of people do. They go in and they die in the bush up there. And they just shrug their shoulders. The Alaskans just shrug their shoulders and they say, people disappear in the bush all the time. You know, and they're mostly people from the lower 48 that are full of themselves.
Yeah.
And I'd have to say that the big lesson that I learned coming away from the Alaska bush was humility.
Yeah.
And that, as any spiritual teacher will tell you, is the key to understanding what is and our place in the world. Humility. It starts with humility. So in a sense, I did succeed. I succeed in my failure.
Yeah.
My failure was I was going to confront God. And in reality, I just survived. And in the process of surviving, I completely and totally surrendered myself to my own wildness, to wildness in general, to the natural world as it really is. And even now when I think about it 30-some years later, I get all worked up about it, because it was a total immersion. It was a total surrender to reality. And once I did that, I was really comfortable in the bush.
Yeah.
And then I started feeling guilty about it. It's like, oh, people think I'm out here trying to survive. I'm actually just out here having a gay old time.
Yeah. You're thriving.
But at the same time, you know, I would be like looking at a wildflower or something, you know, crouched down looking at a wildflower, and all of a sudden I'd hear the wolves howling nearby. And I'd immediately pull out my .44, cock it back, and go like this. And once I was convinced that the coast was clear, I'd put the .44 back in my holster and continue looking at the wildflower. And it's like, that's reality.
Yeah.
You know, that's the world we live in. And
the crazy thing about that being the world we live in is, like, you had to assimilate back to the world that the rest of us live in.
That was the hard part. Yeah.
It's hard enough even if, you go out for a few days, then you got to come back.
Oh yeah, wilderness withdrawal.
You were fully submerged.
Submerged completely. And I tell people that a part of me died in the wilderness in the Alaskan bush, and another part of me was born there.
To pick something up, you got to put
And
something
the part
down.
of me that died was this egocentric Walt. I am so important. I am the center of the universe. Blah, blah, blah. And the part of me that emerged out of the bush was my truly wild nature. Mm-hmm. And I have been keenly aware of my own wildness ever since. I do a good job, I think, keeping myself within the parameters that are imposed on me in the civilization. But when I go out over to the Adirondacks for a few days, I return real quickly to my wild self.
Yeah.
Because that's comfortable for me now.
Yeah.
And coming out of the bush, there's a good metaphor for that, actually. I was just yapping it to my bush pilot, and he said, he strapped me into my seat, and he said, "Are you ready?" And I went like, sure. So then he took off, and he took me over to the Juneau airport, and then we're still talking, and we're crossing the tarmac, and we're going in a rear entry, and right before we entered he opened the door and entered it, he said, "You got to take your firearm off. You can't go in the airport with a firearm."
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I was like, "Oh, of course."
Yeah.
Right? Of course I can't. So I took it off, took the bullets out, and he had my gun case right inside the door. So he dealt with guys like me before.
He knew.
You know what I mean? It's like, oh yeah, this is the first step, and then from that point on, it got harder and harder. That evening, I had a hamburger and a Coke and some fries.
How'd that feel?
Oh my God, that was great. That was just the best thing in the world. And I was already flying high because about an hour or two prior to that, I had taken a shower, hot shower. And it was like, I'm thinking, this is the best part of civilization. Showers, hot food. It's like, like life is good here, right? And then all of a sudden I heard a bush plane flying over my head. And right in the middle of my hamburger, I started crying.
Oh no, why's that?
It was almost like a nervous breakdown. It's like, I'm not ready for this.
To assimilate back in?
I am not ready to assimilate. I want to be on that plane going back in the bush. Yeah.
Well, it's such a stark difference. But like it would be beneficial for some sort of intermediary step.
Yeah.
Because it's literally the craziest culture shock that you could possibly have. It's two different worlds.
Well, ever since then, I oftentimes use the term the madness of civilization. I think that the world we live in, the world we've created for ourselves, is a form of insanity.
I agree with that.
And the fundamental base of that insanity is a collective hubris. We call ourselves Homo sapiens. Sapiens being the word for wise. We are the wise men. We are the all-knowing men. Ooh, aren't we important? Aren't we special? And here recently, I've been reading about different animals that have lived over in natural history over the eons, and trilobites lived for 270 million years. 270 million years, this little arthropod crawling around on the ocean floor for 270 million years. Do you think human beings will live that long?
I do not.
Now, the other thing that's interesting is that when you study natural history, a species by itself is in danger. The genera, or the family, has all kinds of different ways of surviving. They're filling different niches. So when the environment changes, these species might go away, but these species in the family will persist. And right now, we're the only species left of Homo. There were 6 of us, at least, about 50,000 years ago, and we're the last ones.
Is that a consequence of breeding, or is that...
We don't really know exactly what caused that. I mean, a lot of people say that we're actually the ones holding the smoking gun. And others say that we've just bred out the other ones, or we've taken their habitat away from them. It's hard to say, or we've assimilated. We do know that we interbred with the Neanderthals, so it's a possibility that we just merely assimilated them into oblivion.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make is that here we are, the last of an entire genus of Homo, and we're only a million years old. And this trilobite lived for 270 million years. Now you tell me, who's got it all going on?
You asked if I thought that we would live or if we would make it to 270 million. If anything happened, if an EMP went off of some sort, and everybody was plunged back into what we should be able to do on a day-to-day basis, but we're not. I don't know that we would get 270 days, the majority of us.
When I was hiking the Long Trail back in 1995, I used as my trail name Raven.
Yeah.
Because that was my totem, you could say, when I was in the bush, the Alaskan bush. It was a raven. Because every time I was about ready to do something really stupid, I would hear a raven call out. And they're very, very intelligent animals.
How long did it take before you started listening and stopped doing the thing you're about to do?
I'd say about a week. It was gradual. I started to pay attention after about day 4, day 5, after that big boy had passed through my camp, that big Kodiak bear. But yeah, it took about a week before I really settled into the wild and paid attention. And for some reason, whenever I was ready to do something really, really stupid, I would hear a raven kind of giving me a wake-up call. And that kind of brought me to my senses. Although a lot of people would say that just going into the Alaskan bush by yourself is a stupid thing to do. But so I guess it's all relative.
They don't need to be part of the conversation, though.
Yeah. But yeah, it's interesting how that was my come to Jesus moment out there in the bush. And it was the wind that finally woke me up. It was, I think, what it did is it blew through the Endicott River wilderness. I think I mentioned to you it's a very steep canyon with a river cutting through it, and it would do this high-pitched howl. The only other person I know that had ever been in that valley was John Muir, because he'd come over from the Glacier Bay over the Chilkat Mountains into the Endicott River wilderness, and he called it Howling Valley. And I'm not sure whether that was because of the wolves that lived there, or whether it was that wind. For him, it was probably the wolves. For me, it was that wind. And the name of my book that I wrote about being in the Alaskan bush was Arguing with the Wind. Because that's really what I was doing. When I was in the bush, for the first half of my time in the bush, I was arguing with the wind. And that's when I started to realize just how foolish I was being.
Yeah.
Arguing with the wind. It's like, the wind is what it is, right? I wisened up.
What were you, if you were to obviously effectively bastardize the whole experience by summing it up in 2 sentences. What do you think you took back with you the most, that you could articulate the clearest?
God and nature are inextricably entwined.
That's perfect.
What I experienced in the bush and what I have experienced in dribs and drabs through my youth and what I have experienced ever since then are these incredibly brief, mystical moments where I apprehend divine nature. And I don't really know how to make sense of that, or how even to write about it directly. So all of my writing, you could say, is kind of an indirect approach to that subject matter.
But interestingly enough, the way that you write about it, to anyone that has also been in a comparable, we'll call it mindset or environment or attuned to something in particular, it was immediately obvious.
That's true. I've encountered that many times over from response from readers.
Yeah.
And that is very, very comforting to me. That means that I'm on the right track.
Absolutely.
And I think the best way to articulate it is to realize that you can't articulate it at all. So I call it the unspeakable. But I think people, and when I mean people, I mean everybody, have the ability or the potential for experiencing these mystical moments. These moments when you have a direct encounter with the divine and nature. And I think some people have that and don't know what to make of it. Mm-hmm. And other people have it and they try their best to articulate it really beyond their capabilities, and other people suppress it.
Yeah.
They have that and they say, oh, that's just silliness. I'm not going there. And but I think everybody at one point or another in your lives, it's hard for me to imagine anybody going through this world, especially if they spend any time in nature at all, in the wild at all. It's hard for me to believe that they can't sense the natural order that is going on.
Well, we've built such a system that we have blinders to it almost, and I don't know if it's deliberate. I don't know if it's safekeeping, perhaps. You know as well as I know what it can do to the psyche.
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder.
It's risky. I mean, when you put yourself out there, it's risky. I've oftentimes wondered what the difference is between a mystical moment and a bout of madness. I've experienced both in my life.
Seemed a little bit comparable.
There's a very fine line there. And it's really easy to cross over that line. And I think that most people are afraid of that. They're afraid of losing their mind to it, to the reality of the world. And I can sympathize with that.
Yeah.
But I have such a relentless drive within me to understand things that I've always been willing to take that chance. And that's what took me to Alaska.
Yeah.
And that's what takes me out into the woods time and time again. And no matter how well prepared I am, and I'm an old Boy Scout, so I am always prepared to the point of absurdity, I don't have any illusions about the fact that I could be in a situation that I can't get out of. What comes to mind right off the top of my head is the October 4th storm in 1984, when I went up into the Green Mountains on a day much like this. It was balmy, 70 degrees. I did a little fishing to the stream on the way up. And by the time I finished my fishing, the temperature dropped a little. and and it started to drizzle, and I went up into a notch in the mountains, crossed over. There was no trails. I was just out in the wild, and in the process of crossing through that notch, which took me a while because it was nothing even close. I wasn't even on the ground half the time. I was, there's all kinds of blowdown and whatnot. The temperature dropped another 10, 15 degrees, and it started raining. And I was at about 2,500 feet, and I decided I better make camp. So I made camp with a tarp against a fallen log, fallen tree, and got it all situated, making myself a little campfire, and ate some dinner. And the sun was setting. This is October, and by the time the sun set, it was starting to snow.
Oh boy.
And when I woke up in the morning, there was about 2 inches of snow on the ground all around me, and I slept snugly enough. I had all the stuff I needed to sleep snugly.
Sure.
And I took my rain jacket because I had hung that on my walking stick, and I beat the ice off of it before I could put it on.
Yeah.
And then I proceeded to depart from the wild. And the wind really started to kick up. And next thing you know, there are trees dropping around me.
Oh no.
And I heard one behind me, and I jumped, and it missed me. Well, technically it didn't. It's the top branches scratched the back of my back. And I mean, just, a few feet one way or the other, and I would have,
Yeah.
my goose would have been cooked.
And that's absolutely luck of the draw too, because
It's the luck of the draw.
There's nothing you can do to prevent it. There's nowhere you can go.
Right, and I was bushwhacking. I was out in the middle of nowhere in October. I mean, even if people had come to try to find me, if I'd been trapped under a tree, I would have froze to death.
Yeah.
Before they got there. And
if they got there.
they would have gotten there eventually. Vermont's not that big a state. But I had all the ice forming in my beard.
Yeah.
And because it was, then all of a sudden it warmed up and turned back to freezing rain.
Oh, lucky you.
Yeah. And I was out on Route 2, and I was walking into Bolton, and on Route 2, and the wind was blowing right at me, and I was just getting covered with ice. And then I came into a little convenience store, called my wife, and she picked me up. And yeah, that's how she found me, all ice covered. She's, "What have you been doing?"
How do you feel in those moments? I don't know that I have somebody that understands me enough. When I'm in those moments and I get picked up in the car and I'm still a little bit wild and I'm transitioning back, we didn't go too deep, but that person sitting next to you, and they were listening to the radio the entire drive. They had the heater on the entire drive. Windshield wipers going.
My wife Judy has spent enough time with me in the woods.
Yeah.
Where she knows exactly what I'm going through.
Nice.
And when she picked me up, I hiked 100-mile wilderness in northern Maine. That's that last 100 miles of the Appalachian Trail that there's no place to resupply. That's why they call it a wilderness. It's really just remote logging country.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a wilderness area per se. And I'd been in the woods for 12 days, and as soon as I got in the car, she pulled out a baguette and a pint of blueberries.
Nice.
And I'm like, oh yeah, this is why I married this woman. And then, of course, as soon as we got
out of the park.
Out of the park. And as soon as we got to the hotel, she said, "Strip, get all those clothes off your body and into that bag."
Reassimilate.
So then I stripped all my dirty clothes and put them in this bag, tied it up, and threw that in the trunk, of course. And then I marched later, and then I marched naked into the showers, under her orders. So she knew the whole drill.
Yeah.
And she knew how to assimilate me.
That's a lucky draw, my friend.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. But I've taken people into the woods for a couple of days at a time, and it's kind of fun. My brother Greg and I hiked over in the Adirondacks for 4 days, and he's kind of a mild-mannered guy. You know, he's not what you call a wilderness dude. You know what I mean? He likes to do antiquing. You know.
Sure.
So, I mean, he's
slight fish out of water.
Yeah, he's a little bit. But he liked waterfalls, so we went from waterfall to waterfall there in the Adirondacks, and he was digging that. And then when we came out, he said to me, "I feel weird." And I said, "Yep." Welcome to wilderness withdrawal. It took him about a day or so to really assimilate and get back in the swing of things. And now, of course, it's even harder because we have just all this preeminent media, and the media is so full of bullshit. What's that called? Oh, this morning I did about an hour's worth of doom scrolling.
Oh no.
Yeah, you know what I mean? It's like it's the easiest thing in the world to do, right? You can find all the shit that's going on in the world all around you, and you go like, oh man. And all you want to do is just close your iPad and do anything but engage with any of that craziness going on out there.
And yet somehow there's a force that just keeps you locked in. I had to just get rid of the entire kit and caboodle, throw the whole thing out.
Well, I can understand that. I can understand it.
My wife's homepage on her computer is MSN. And I tell you, nothing good has ever happened on MSN.com.
Well, you know, I sometimes question whether anything good has happened on any of those sites out there. I have my own website for Wood Thrush Books, my publishing company. And,
I'd say something good's happened there.
Yeah, but in terms of news sources, one of the biggest problems we have in this day and age is, now everything is geared towards what people want to hear.
Yeah.
So they'll gravitate to whatever news source is feeding them, the kind of information that they feel comfortable digesting.
Or what they don't want to hear is also just as marketable. All these things, specifically that I notice on this MSN page, they're all op-ed pieces. And they're all fear.
Oh, yeah. There's a lot of big fear.
I would certainly click on that. And how many ads do I see in the process? There's the market.
It's funny that you mentioned fear. I traded in stocks for a while, very briefly, some clean stocks. I got my ethos kind of wrapped up in my finances, which is never a good thing to do. And in the process of doing that, I learned the fundamental rule of the stock market, which can be applied to all business, really. And the two driving forces, the bears and the bulls, are greed and fear. Yeah. And I'm thinking, this can't be good.
Not an awesome combination.
It just can't be good. Is this really what we're all about? Greed and fear? It's like, can't we do any better than this?
I think we certainly can do better, and I don't think it's what we're all about, but I do think it is the most powerful force. It's the loudest voice in the room.
Well, it's the loudest voice in the room, no doubt. But there are other voices.
Yeah.
What John Burroughs called the still small voice that he hears in nature. And in a lot of ways, every nature writer, including myself, is that still small voice. We speak for nature. And here, I'll show you my revelation here. My wife insists that I wear it. Simplify.
Love it.
This is a shirt that I picked up at the Thoreau Society when I was down in Concord last year. And I think my wife picked it up for me, now that I think about it. And that, of course, was Thoreau's mantra. And he has that still small voice. He's speaking for nature. And I think a lot of people are speaking for nature. And when we speak for nature, what we're really doing is speaking for ourselves, because we're a part of nature.
Yeah.
We don't stand apart from it. And that's where I think we get confused, thinking that we are somehow apart from nature. And the more we distance ourselves from it, I think the more discontent we become as a species.
Yeah.
Because we're groping for something in this fear and greed world that is not sustaining us. It's like fear and greed are not good reasons to live.
No.
You know? But when
I wouldn't get out of bed for it.
I certainly don't. But when I go out into the natural world, I mean, even on a walk like this, something happens to me that kind of readjusts my mindset, and I start to pick up on little cues, like that little bird that was just singing a second ago.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, there he is again. And I think that there is a deeper sense of satisfaction, a deeper sense of well-being than mere pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
And that may sound strange, you know, living in America, to say something like that, since, you know, this, you know, we're all about the pursuit of happiness here, right? But I mean, happiness is fleeting, and we all have moments when we're sad, when we're miserable, when we're in despair, when we're joyful, when we're just kind of indifferent to the world. I mean, we run the whole gamut every day. I mean, how many emotions do you have in any given day?
I would say 4, but they're always scaled up to 10, so it feels a lot more.
But
I would rather feel content than happy if given the choice, because
well,
I know that happy comes with the withdrawal after. Content doesn't.
Well,
and out here I don't get happy, I get content.
I think content's a good word for it. I haven't actually found the word that I'm looking for that really kind of describes that deep sense of well-being that I feel when I'm in the wild. And it's usually in the wild when I feel that.
True.
Pardon me?
True.
What do you mean?
True would be a word for me.
True?
Yeah.
As in this is true and everything else is bullshit?
Yeah, exactly like that.
Well, that's one way of putting it.
Because it kind of, to me, it implies content and not happy, which is exactly how I feel about it. But it's like, it's not sharp in either direction. It's just what is. And that is the magic to me.
It is the magic. In fact, that's my term for the divine in nature, is with a capital W, is what is. Capital W, capital I, what hyphen is. That's the term that I use for divine nature, for God, per se, because that's all I can say about it.
Yeah.
It's like, it is what it is. We hear that phrase all the time, but somehow we don't let it register. You know, we still go on to try to make the world be something that it isn't.
It took me until reading What Is in a second piece of yours to understand what you were saying. The first time I read it, I was like, oh, perhaps I'm missing something. Perhaps this is a name dawned upon something that from an earlier writing I didn't get. And then I see it the second time and I was like, oh my God, you said so much in 2 words.
It just is what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to pass judgment on it. We don't have to. I don't like spiders.
Okay.
You know, I don't like the way they operate. You know, so, you know, I'm going to die and go to heaven, and I'm going to meet my maker, and I'm going to say, hey, what's with these spiders? You know, why'd you come up with that horrific design? You know, what are you trying to accomplish here? Now, how many things are wrong with that picture? You know, the whole idea of dying and going and somehow living on in some level of consciousness, of the the divine nature somehow being a personage that I can interact with that way, passing judgment.
Having the choice to take an audience with you.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, I think that's where we get all mucked up, is not accepting things as they are.
Yeah.
And, I personally, I find it very difficult to do that. I find it very difficult to accept what is. It's not easy. But I am inspired by John Burroughs again. Towards the end of his life, he wrote a book called Accepting the Universe. And in that book, he talked about doing just that. Seeing the world as it really is, and then just saying, okay, I'm good with this.
Yeah.
And, for me, that's still a work in progress. I have not yet reached the point where I can say that in all honesty. I still am passing judgment, even though I don't want to.
What I find interesting about your philosophy is you don't dwell too much on the end. You spend most of your time on the process. And that's interesting to me, because a lot of people that I know that, hyperfixate on what they don't agree with the function of the universe, their core problem is the end. And I've seen you address it, but you don't seem to dwell on it.
I'm not even sure there is an end.
There's enough problems in the beginning.
No, I don't even know if there's an end.
To look at the system, you would think that there isn't, right? This feels like a perpetual motion machine.
Yeah, I don't know. When it comes to nature, I'm flabbergasted.
Yeah.
And the more I learn about it, the more flabbergasted I am. The only thing I can say for sure about nature is that it has an agenda. It has a driving force in it that is more powerful than anything else in the universe. But I'm not privy to that information. I don't know what it is nature is all about. And there are lots of speculations in philosophies and religions that come up with these different ends, as you put them. This is where it's all going. This is what it's all about. But, as far as I can tell from my experience, empirically, there's no indication of what nature's up to.
Yeah.
Evolution is a relentless force.
Ooh,
but I don't believe in progress. I don't think it's going towards a place. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to an ultimate, I don't think that it has an ultimate goal. Or if it does, I'm not privy to that information.
Can I pitch a fun thought to you?
Fire.
Okay, so I've had this thought. There's always the conversation, is it intelligent design or is it evolution? So here's my thought.
The ultimate question, right?
Here's my thought. Take the Model T. Now take a Tesla Roadster. Put them on either end of a flat plane. Litter everything in between that got from the Model T to the Roadster. Now go away for 1,000,000 years. Come back with some sentient life form that has curiosity. They're gonna say, wow, look at that evolution. I say that's the evolution of intelligent design. Is that what's happening here? No, I have no idea. I have no way to even, I don't have the hubris to say that I know. I have no idea. But could.
I think there's complexity. There's a definite progression of complexity. The first life forms on this planet were like bacteria. They were just real simple little single-celled organisms. And now there's us. We're obviously far more complex than that.
Mm-hmm. Creating systems now from us that are arguably as complex or more complex.
Well, that's the whole argument of AI, isn't it?
Yep.
But I don't know if complexity itself is indicative of some kind of greater purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know.
And also, not that I agree or disagree with the concept of a greater purpose, I don't know. But to have that be the steadfast rule almost feels like that falls back in line with the hubris.
I think it does. I think that if you've ever take a look at any, I was going to say primitive worldview, but actually any worldview, primitive or modern or sophisticated, there's always this presumption that we somehow play a central role.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, as I tried to illustrate with my contrast and comparison of Homo sapiens with trilobites, I'm not quite sure that applies.
Yeah. It's like we can quantify that we have absolutely manipulated our environment in a way that is exponentially deeper than any other living organism that we are aware of. That is true. We can quantify that. But if you were to remove that single element, what is the separation between us and a mosquito in the grand plan, right? How could you, other than...
The mosquito has no illusions.
Exactly. By the way, mosquitoes are out. Today's the first day of spring. I was outside yesterday, covered in them.
Yeah, I'm sure. I think that I've been studying a lot of natural history here in the past couple of years, and I read a couple of books about octopuses.
Very, very smart.
Yeah.
Wildly smart.
Wildly smart, you know. They have neurons. They think. They're one of the most intelligent. They far surpass any other invertebrate life form in terms of intelligence. I mean, they knock it out of the park. There's no other. The only other thing that matches them are those of us that have skeletal systems, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Mammals, for example. You know, there's a lot of us brainy mammals kicking around there.
Mm-hmm.
We're not the only ones. Chimps are also pretty brainy. Give them a couple million years, they probably would come around to their own.
Oh, yeah.
But
I've heard arguments that we're holding them back.
That could be. But what I find phenomenal about octopuses is that they have neurons not just in their brains, but they have them in their tentacles.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is completely alien.
Yeah.
And
How
I don't
can
have
you even
no
conceptualize
idea.
it? You know?
I don't even I have a hard time even understanding that or what that means, but they actually get information, you know, in their tentacles. And I don't understand how or why there's an animal like that.
Yeah.
It's like, what?
How does it develop to that, too?
Yeah, how did it get to that point? But more importantly, how's that part of nature's agenda? You know, and then I'm beginning to thinking, well, is it possible that 5 or 10 million years from now, or 100 million years from now, is it possible that octopuses will take over the world? That they'll develop a level of intelligence that far surpasses ours?
There's a subgenre of science fiction that dives right into that.
Doesn't that sound like science fiction?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, it kind of fits. I mean, you know, they're intelligent, and they're problem solving, which is what we brag about being, right? We're big problem solvers.
Yeah.
That's our big skill. And here they
I've
are.
heard that.
They're, you know, they don't even have a skeletal structure. You know, and they think with their tentacles. It's like, man.
Hey, they
That's
don't need
beyond
skeletons
me.
in the water. Hey, Walt, it has been a pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you, buddy.
It's been fun. Yeah.
Come back sometime.
Yeah, I will.